Hi, Tim. Oh,
I'm trying not to run the show. I put myself on the right in the guest slot for once. So,
you're half running it and half guest. That's a
okay,
new one for
yes.
us.
Well, as you put yourself forward to talk about traveling stories, and we had a spare week, I thought I'd put myself forward to talk about my new YouTube travel channel,
It's
which I have realised I haven't done a video for a couple of weeks, but I am in the process of creating one at the moment. So,
it's
anyway.
it's brilliant, Tim. I was one of the first subscribers. Do I get a gift?
Well, I've been doing reasonably well. I'm just got about 30 subscribers so far, which isn't bad.
That's really
A
good.
month or so. So I am feeling under pressure to get the next video done though.
Are you working on the next one, or is this?
I am, yes. I'm about halfway through. I can show you a little infographic I have from the next. Ooh, that worked better than I expected it to.
Oh, wow.
These are the states that I still have to visit in the US. So my next video is, well, it's not about how I'm actually going to do it because I haven't worked that out yet, but it's about what I'm intending to do in this year. So
You have a couple states that are farther away from the others. You have a big group in the middle, or kind of
yes.
westish middle, and then a couple that are kind of farther away.
Well, I mean, this is why I'm not been traveling. This is why I really can't do it before my 50th birthday, which is in next month, because they're all up north, basically. The only ones I could probably do, well, I mean, I could do all of them because, I mean, obviously it's not going to be like it's impossible to travel to Montana in January or February. It just wouldn't be very pleasant. So
yeah,
well, I take that off because it'd be distracting.
So what, your 50th is next month, did you say?
Yes, yeah.
I don't think I realized that.
So my original plan in 2018, I think when I started doing this, was to visit all 50 states before I was 50 years old. And then, of course, the pandemic, the COVID incident happened, which closed off global travel for about 2 years, as you and James obviously know. So I did my best to try and catch up, and I probably could have done it, but there is always a balance between doing something and doing something in an enjoyable way.
Yeah, yeah.
I could have done it, but it would have been like basically airport, out, grab a coffee, airport, grab a coffee, airport, grab a coffee, and I didn't want to do that. So I kind of said to myself, I want to, well, giving away my next video.
Okay.
One of my aims is to visit all of these 10 remaining states by the end of this year. So
by 2024. Okay, so this is the thing, Tim. Let's backtrack all the way back, because we kind of just jumped into bam, here you are. But for those who might be new to the Oh No Show, who may come across Tim Lewis and doesn't know your background, you have a goal to get to all 50 states before you're 50. Now it's going to be before you're 51, I suppose. But how did this happen? Where did this goal come from? Tell us a little bit about this.
Well, it kind of started out as I'm going to tell you a long boring story here, so hopefully we have enough time. But I got used to going to conferences in the US, especially Social Media Marketing World, which is in San Diego. So one thing I really don't like, because I'm a tall person and I can't sleep on planes, and I'm cheap, so I travel in economy on planes usually. So the first year I went to Social Media Marketing World, it was like 2015, I think it was. I took the direct flight, and then I took the overnight flight back to the UK from San Diego. And I was so wrecked from doing an overnight flight because I didn't sleep at all. And you to get in and you just fall asleep. So the next year I thought, well, what I'll do, because I knew from my corporate days that there are day flights you can do. There are flights that start on the East Coast. Like you get there for 8 o'clock in the morning, and it will arrive in London at like 8 in the evening. So the next year I thought, well, I'll break up the trip And then each time I went to the US for a conference or an event, I basically went around every single. There used to be more places that you could do it from. So I think at the moment there's only Chicago, New York, and Boston where you can fly, and possibly Washington DC. I'm not sure, Dulles, where you can do a morning flight to the US. Then after a couple of years, about a year or so doing that, I started thinking, well, maybe as I'm already breaking my trip up, maybe I could go somewhere in the middle. So one year I went, because I knew people in like Kansas, I knew people in New York, and I was going to South by Southwest. So one year I went sort of Kansas, and then I went to Texas, and then I went to Boston, to New York. And I started after that just going like any excuse to visit any of the states. And I didn't have a formal plan to do like visit all 50 states for ages, but I saw on Twitter that there was this 50 by 50 thing that somebody had done. And it's normally American people with trailers who do it, who go around touring the US in car. But I was like, well, I counted up the states, and I've already done like about 12 or 13, I think, at that time, possibly up to 15. So I was like, my birthday is far enough away, I can do this. So I started, I think it was 2019. I started thinking, oh, how can I visit more states? So that's where I started from.
And 2019, right when the pandemic hit, bam.
Well, it was the start of 2019. So I had all of 2019. I think I visited probably 12 or 15 states in 2019, something like that. So I was well on course to doing it, but then obviously, bam,
everything shut
disaster.
down.
Yes.
So you've done almost all of them. Tell us your top maybe 3 states that you recommend to everyone where we should go, because you do a lot of recommending even for us here in the States, us Americans. We tend to not travel as much as you across the pond.
Well, I mean, doing these videos, I mean, they always say, like, if you want to really understand something, try and teach it or try and recommend stuff. What I would like as a state is not necessarily the same as what you would like in the state. But what I can do is present my knowledge of what these states are like to people. And then some people say, oh, yeah, I like that. And other people won't. I mean, obviously, California would be. I mean, obviously, you live in California, so it probably wouldn't. But even in California, I mean, there are lots of places and things to do that you wouldn't have ever done. So I was talking to you about the presidential museums. I haven't actually been to either of them, but there are 2 US presidential museums in California, which I want to visit at some point. So California's just got so much. I mean, you've got national parks, you've got beaches, you've got San Diego, you've got LA, you've got San Francisco. So, I mean, it's a really boring suggestion to say California is a state.
But it's true, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If you like, I mean, there's a lot to be said for the other Pacific states as well, Oregon and the other one, Washington, which I barely scratched the surface. I mean, I've been to Portland and I've been to Seattle.
But you went to a really cool island, which sometimes we forget about the islands off the upper West Coast.
Yeah, well, that's because Stu Heineck, who's somebody I've interviewed loads of time. I've interviewed him on my old Big in Self-Publishing podcast, and I had him on the Twitter chat. I tried to get him on this channel, and at some point he might actually come on as a guest. But it's early morning West Coast time, so it's always hard to get people on. But I've known him, but I've never actually met him in person. And he lives on, I think it's Whidbey Island. I always want to say Whitney, but I think it's Whidney Island. And he was like, oh, so I was like, oh yeah, I'll come. And then looked on the map and I'm like, oh, how am I going to do this? But with a combination of Seattle transport, Ubers, ferries, and then getting him to pick me up at the ferry port, I managed to get go to that island and then hang out with him for a day. That was fun. I mean, I always like, as a solo traveler, I think it makes so much difference if you know somebody in the place. And that was one of my key determinants to begin with about where I visited in a particular state. If I knew somebody, like in a couple of the states I've got left, I know people. So I think I'm going to try and arrange to meet up with them, even if sometimes it's not the most convenient place to get to.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing that I'm doing that Americans are amazed by. I'm not hiring a car because I don't really like driving. And it's also you drive on the wrong side of the road over there. So, and if it wasn't for Uber and Lyft, that would basically be impossible. Really. It'd be impossible to do this like even 10, 15 years ago, really. Well, we've got so many airports in the US and it's ridiculous that you could kind of go out, but not in any meaningful way. So the next question that I would ask me was,
yes, Tim. What do you want to know, Tim?
Well, no, I mean, I probably will make a video about this at some point, or maybe a short. I'm still working out how to make videos, so that's why it's taken me ages to do each one. But is what do I define as visiting a state?
Ah, yes. You've see, I know you so well that you tell me this all the time. So tell us the answer, Tim.
Well, it depends. It depends on your own preference, but my definition is that I have to do something in the state. So I have to visit an attraction. Even going and eating something counts, or getting a coffee. I mean, to be fair, some of the states I've visited, the criteria is a bit. I'd like to revisit some of them, but it's also like airport transfers do not count, and just walking over the border does not count.
Okay.
You have to do something in the state. Staying in a state overnight counts, I think, basically anyway. But I'd like to visit an attraction or do something there. Otherwise, to me, in my mind, it doesn't count.
They're teasing me or you or one of us. James said, Tim, how do you define visiting a state? Gabriella said, James.
That's a good question, James. I'm glad you asked it.
I'm so glad you guys asked. So I thought so. So, Tim, if you just stop in a state like my dear husband James did on the way home, that doesn't count. You have to actually get out.
The thing is that I say it doesn't count, but it could count to you.
Okay. There's no
because
rules.
It is a very much a personal criteria thing. So at the moment, the only state that is removed from my list that I've actually been present in is Colorado, because I transferred in Denver Airport. So, and years ago, it was funny. Last year, I managed to go to Ohio properly and Kentucky properly. Well, actually, no, Kentucky properly for the first time, even though I transferred in Cincinnati Airport before.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, James is saying, oh, we got out of the Seattle Airport. Oh, so that counts then, because he was in if he stayed overnight in a hotel.
It counts.
It counts.
James, you're catching up to Tim here.
Yes, it's like, well, I mean, it counts if it counts, but you just need a criteria for
whatever your own criteria is. Okay, Tim, I want to ask you specifically about your channel.
Yeah.
You decided to do a travel channel, and I've watched several of your episodes, and it's quite interesting because going back to what you said previously, you might find something that us here in the States might not necessarily find or have considered, or people around the world might come across. So tell us about your channel. What makes this exciting for you? Kind of fill us in with why this channel.
Well, partly because people have been asking for it. People keep asking me about my US travels. I put the channel's called Lewis TCF. I can't really remember what I thought the F stood for when I said it, but it's travel, conferences, and I put fun, but I really can't. I think there was some other reason why it was an F, but my name is really common, so I have to put something on the end of it. And
F for
TC
friends,
didn't
right?
sound,
It's F for
TC
friends.
doesn't sound fun, so I'm put an F on it. And also, it's like, as you say, I am very much a champion of the everyman smaller American city, because there's so many of them with like really good attractions and things, and most Americans don't visit them. And America is the country of subsidized air travel. It's really quite cheap to travel around the US. And there's so much in the US to visit. I mean, the UK also, in many ways, is a very blessed country with places to visit. But for whatever reason, I'm visiting the US at the moment. And I think most Americans don't. Most Americans don't really visit their own country.
Yeah.
So if I can highlight smaller cities, places like Fargo or Milwaukee or somewhere like that, which have got really good attractions to visit, and I think that's a good thing. So I suppose there's part of me is creating a channel to allow Americans the confidence of visiting their own country.
You're doing it in a way of top 10 places to visit and whatever you're saying. You're kind of giving us a list.
Well, I've already got into, like, people have said, like, you're putting the word new randomly in there. Well, my current 4 videos, which is really just one big video I did, that and then I decided to split into 4 to make it more palatable. Is it like US hidden gems? Kind of. That particular top 10 list is new places, so places I hadn't visited before in 2023. Right. The reason why I said new places was partly because I haven't got video footage of a lot of the old places. So it's a practical thing. And also, as James pointed out, it is the hidden gems.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a case of, because, like I say, San Diego probably would be 1, or New York might be 2 or 3 or 4. And it's kind of like, oh, yeah, but everybody says those places. So I wanted to highlight other places. I mean, obviously, Alaska was number 1 on my list. I mean, let's just spoil it for anybody who hasn't watched my videos yet. But even Alaska, a lot of Americans haven't visited, and it's just an amazing place.
It's one of those places that might be on our bucket list, but it's a matter of actually making it happen, because it's a bit off the beaten flight path.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about Alaska, and I'm suffering from this. I'm going to say about this in my next video. But so if I go back to my little map thing that or hide our faces, thankfully, for anybody. I had the idea of visiting Yellowstone National Park, which is basically in Wyoming, but it's over the border from Montana. So those two up in the top left. And the problem with that, and the same with Alaska, is you really ideally need to book really far ahead to get the best rates, best things, to make it not stupidly expensive.
Okay.
So I ended up going to Alaska for basically 3 days. Which I wouldn't recommend. I would recommend going to Alaska for a longer period of time and staying there for a bit of a break and booking far ahead. But I did manage to do the Alaska Railroad, which I'd recommend to anybody. Just basically take that train up from Anchorage to Fairbanks, or you can go down. Actually, there's like you can go down to a national park, I think, at the other end. So yeah, I've totally forgotten what the question was now.
So you have a few more states to visit, Tim.
Yes.
Where are you going first?
Not sure. Probably what I am going to do is I want to visit somewhere nice in West Virginia. Probably be the first one, because West Virginia is easy to get to from Washington, D.C. You can take a train there, and it's supposed to be amongst one of the most beautiful train journeys in the US, if the most slowest.
Okay.
From Washington, D.C. to West Virginia. And then I'll probably try and do maybe somewhere like Omaha or somewhere like that to do Nebraska and Iowa at the same time, because those border towns are really good for doing lots at the same time.
Okay.
So that's how I end up in some of these obscure places. There was a place, well, there is a place called Sioux City that I was thinking of visiting, which is on the border of 3 states.
Okay.
But it's really hard to get to. So I probably won't do that. I'm probably going to do this. I'm teasing my next video. I'm going to talk about all of this.
Here, James has some good questions. He's helping with the interview today. What would you say you've learned in your travels so far?
I would say that the US is much more varied than people think it is in terms of different areas in the US. And it's not just the whole Republican Democrat thing. It's just the whole mindset thing is very different. And there are lots of weird historical resentments and things. Like I remember somebody in the South complaining about how people in Boston were up themselves and all the rest of it. And I was like, and I don't think they'd ever met anybody from Boston. And yeah, each part of the US has its own kind of weird prejudices and the more backward, well, I was saying the more backward places, but that's not really true. The more kind of isolated places are in some ways the nicest places to visit, because you get a much better view of what America's heart is like if you go away from the bigger cities in the middle, on the edges. It's just one big school playground. Yeah, I think that's probably true, actually.
It's one big school playground. Would you say it's similar to the UK and how you're describing it? Throughout the US, we have cultures within a culture, right? Is the UK similar? Is in the UK, if you were in the North versus the South versus the East versus the West, would you find something similar?
You would, but it's not quite as varied as the US. But on the other hand, because the UK is so much smaller than, I mean, the UK is smaller than like half the size of Texas, I think. There's a lot more. You can go a very short distance in the UK and find noticeable difference in accent and behaviour and everything that you don't really get in the US. Maybe in the East Coast a bit, but just because of the sheer distance, I think there's more difference in the US than within the UK. On the other hand, you don't have to go very far in the UK, you see a big difference. And certainly somebody in Cornwall in the UK is very different to somebody in the Outer Hebrides. Probably not as much actually as say Edinburgh or somewhere like that.
Yeah. So when we say the UK, are we including, we're including Scotland, right? So if I say north, that's Scotland. South could be Wales even.
James is doing the questions here. He's saying like issues like Devon, the scone thing is.
There's definitely the scone. Okay, so I've been introduced to the scone debacle or the scone controversy.
Scone versus scone. I mean, like
scone versus scone and how to eat the scones.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, Tim, this begs the question: when you're done with the US, will you do a video for the UK?
Possibly, though. Part of the problem of doing one of these kind of self-imposed challenges where you have to do it is that you end up neglecting other places. So I kind of like, I want to go to Mexico and do some of the Mexican places and visit there. I want to go to Thailand, maybe Vietnam, other places like that. And I haven't really like, because they're not on the way to the US. Mexico, maybe I could have done, but so yeah, I mean, I probably should do the UK actually, because the UK's got an extensive rail network. So I suppose I could try and visit all or every county in the UK.
But, that would be fun. Would that include Ireland too?
Yeah, I could do. I mean, Ireland hasn't got that many counties.
But they have the Guinness factory. I mean, that's that's where we want to go, Tim.
Yeah. James had another good question that he's interviewing me. It's like, have you visited more USA states than UK? Oh, UK counties. I thought you said countries. Don't know is the answer. Probably. I'm not sure how many UK counties. I probably visited 20, 30 UK counties, but not.
Yeah, that's okay. So James asked, what have you learned on your travels? What would you say is the biggest mistake you've made and you wouldn't do again?
Well, again, I'm going to do a video on this at some point. Part of my mistake has been the way that I book flights. I found that there's a much better way to book flights than what I've done. So I've told you that I hate night flights. So typically what I've always done is I've booked a flight to New York or Boston or somewhere as like a return, so I could do a morning flight back to the UK. But I've discovered that actually you can do these connecting flights. So let's say I went to Denver or somewhere like that. You can book that as a single ticket and then put up to 23 hours as a stopover.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually do what I was doing in terms of going back there and doing those intermediates as one ticket. So that's kind of the biggest financial mistake. In terms of like, if I was doing this again from a purely state visiting point of view, there are certain places and I could have gone and got a lot of states very quickly from, and I didn't do it that way. Okay. So Philadelphia is a fantastic place to go for state collecting, because I was looking, when I was there recently, looking at the train board, you've got about 6 states you can get to in a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. But I'd already visited most of them before I even started doing that. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of border towns and things and places that I didn't visit. Like there's that Four Corners place in, I think it's Colorado, which is on the corner of 4 states. I could have gone there, but it would have been kind of hard to do, because I think it's a bit in the middle of nowhere. It would have been kind of hard to do something in each state, or just to go around and eat a Mars bar in each state or something like that to do my criteria.
Yeah. So, you're giving a lot of travel tips. Again, I've seen your videos. You're giving a lot of travel tips for those of us who are less traveled and other travelers. What has been your biggest excitement, your biggest win that you're just so excited to put out there into the world and let the world know in your travels?
I think the thing is, like, it's just how good it is to travel places. And I think that I overcame my fear, because I had never really done much solo travel before. I was always frightened to travel anywhere. And I think the biggest win for me is that I can now just visit somewhere. I'm not yet really at the stage where I'm going to go somewhere where people speak a different language, even though that's going to happen soon. Mm-hmm. Because if you go somewhere that's touristy, then you're going to be fine. But I think overcoming the fear of solo travel is the biggest thing that I've experienced over the last couple of years, because it gives you just so much freedom to go to the places you want to go to. It's also not that I wouldn't travel with other people again, but you do end up on this kind of weird negotiation with other people as to what you want to do, and that can be good and it can be bad. But I think doing solo travel, learning to do solo travel, is a fantastic thing for people to do, because then you can't complain, because it's like the number of people who say like, oh, I'd like to do that, but, and then it's like the but isn't really anything serious. It's, you could choose to do travel, but you're frightened of it. That's fair enough. But people don't say that. They say, oh, well, because I've got this or I've done that. And it's like, well, a lot of the time that's not true.
Okay, this is my second to last question, Tim. Why is travel so important?
Well, arguably it's not. It's probably not the answer that you want. But for me personally, and I think for most other people, it's about seeing other perspectives on the world. Because the only way, in some ways, the only way to appreciate your own culture and your own life and city and place is to visit other places. So it's like, I know that the weather in the US can be really bad in winter, and it can be bad in summer. And I visited like New Orleans in September, and that wasn't pleasant climate-wise. So I've got a new appreciation for how generally good the UK climate is. I mean, it's like 0 degrees Celsius today, but by US standards, that's kind of, for a lot of the US in the north, that's kind of balmy winter temperatures.
Uh-huh.
And it's experiencing other cultures and getting to learn about other things, and seeing just that feeling of exploration and research and the shock of the new, so to speak. I think that's why I like travel. So, but yeah, I don't think it's essential that people travel, but I think it helps most people. And certainly, if you're of an inquisitive nature, then travel is something you should do.
Curious, remain curious. Tim, where can our friends across the globe find your new travel channel?
Well, if you type Tim Lewis TCF into YouTube search, it should find it. Or I think even Tim Lewis and then travel seems to find my channel, which is good. It's like it really won't be the top thing, but it's a little star asterisk. Or you can scan the QR code I'll put down here, or I'll put it in the comments as well. So yes, and people can watch my. There's only there's only 4 videos there, which is basically one long video I've chopped up into 4, which is my top 10 new places that I visited last year. And some people have said like, it's an interesting selection of places that I've chose. So,
but it's different, and maybe that's what sets you apart from other travel channels.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I put places like Cincinnati and Milwaukee in there, which I wasn't really expecting very much. I would like to say that I'm really research all my travels, but a lot of the time I book somewhere and then I go to TripAdvisor and go down the top 10 list of places and visit them in a city.
You go and wing it, huh?
And yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the level of like quality museums and things in the US is really good for smaller cities. And often you find, I mean, like one of the first things I mention is, I can't pronounce it, I think it's called the Kelmsgaard, but this Viking ship that was just sitting in a museum in Moorhead, which is the suburb of Fargo in Minnesota. And I just accidentally, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This guy, American guy, built a replica Viking ship and sailed it from the Great Lakes all the way to Norway in the 80s.
Wow.
And then they shipped it back in a ship container and put it in this museum in Fargo. And it's just things like that you just stumble across. And they're just like, there's so many museums and attractions in the US.
Yeah.
And in a lot of, like, I mean, you expect it in Europe and you expect it in other places, but there's lots of little places in the US where there's great museums, but Americans just don't go there. So that's what kind of the things I was trying to highlight really.
Absolutely. Go to Tim Lewis's new travel channel. Click on our little square linky here.
You don't click on it. You have to get your phone up and things. Or if you're on the phone and you're watching this on your phone, then I'll put it down in the comments. A link to it, hopefully. Or even if you're using the computer thingamajig.
You have plans to release a new video soon, Tim? When can we expect this?
Well, it should have been a week ago. I am in the process of recording a new video about my 2023 plans. And then I'm probably going to, I'm still learning how to do it. So I'm trying to do produced videos because most of the stuff I do is live videos like this.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really do very well. And it's also not what people want to see on YouTube. So at the moment, it's no regular schedule, but hopefully with time, I'll get better and better and quick, and I can have a nice little production schedule going along. So my current plan is to do like 1 a month, but I want to get up to like 1 every 2 weeks and then 1 a week and just keep going and try and just create quality videos that are useful for people. So if that's travel tips and places to visit.
Yeah. James wants to know, can you do a behind the scenes video of you making the videos?
Yes, I can. Whether anybody would want to watch it is another matter. Well, maybe James would, so maybe
James
I'll.
will watch it. James loves the travel. He's actually introduced me to a lot of travel channels, and
Yeah,
so has
well,
my son.
yeah.
So
There's lots of good ones out there. So I found a few. I found a new one, and I might try and get him on this show actually, where it's all about booking flights and stuff. And there's
oh,
lots of
that's
like
you've
stuff
sent
about
me.
yeah.
That's so important. You've sent me a lot of information. Okay, wait, my computer's gonna shut off. Here's a blooper for us. Let's plug you in.
Okay.
Here's a
Well, can I
blooper.
press the outro?
Before you shut off, my last question. I was gonna ask a different question. That was my last question, but I have a new last question, Tim.
Okay.
My last question. Can we expect a 60 countries by the time you're 60?
Ooh. Ooh. Maybe.
Dun dun
No.
dun. You don't
I
have to
mean,
answer now.
my slight problem. I mean, the reason why I'm not keen on the whole visiting every country in the world thing is that, say what you like about the US is relatively civilized, and at the moment, at least, you're not in some sort of civil war situation, or like I'm not likely to be kidnapped or sold into slavery or anything like that. When going to every country in the world, you have got to visit places like Algeria and the like, which are very, let's say, can be a bit fruity. Now, anything is possible with planning, obviously, but that's why I've never ever wanted to visit every country in the world. But I think there's like 150 odd, so I probably could find 60 countries in the world that
60.
I could want to visit.
Have you been to Canada?
Yes, I have been. I've been to only to Toronto though.
Okay,
So
so there's Canada.
Toronto is pretty like America light, really. It's the most American place in the Canada, allegedly. So.
Mexico. There's a lot of countries in South America. There's 30 in Europe first. That's James just helping us with. I'm encouraging this so I can watch and see where I should go. Really,
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I found discovered is that if you book, this is a bizarre thing, but if you go on to, we'll do a video. I'm going to say like, we'll do a video on this. But if you go onto Google flights and then you do like somewhere like London to the US and you see the business class fares, right? If you then change it from London to Budapest or Dublin or some European city, you can see the fare almost halve. And that's all because of air passenger duty and Heathrow taxes and the rest of it. Even though a lot of these flights are just an extra flight into Heathrow and then the same flight.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, it's competition, taxes, and sometimes discounts. There's so much variation in flight and hotel costs. It's ridiculous. What day of the week you travel makes a big difference as well. So anyway, yes.
Well,
So I may be visiting more European places because sometimes it's cheaper to fly to somewhere in Europe and then fly back via London to the US.
Yeah.
Than it is to actually go direct from the UK, and that's bizarre.
I feel like you sent me this information, and part of me wants to accept that challenge in the coming year. So and see, but at the same time, I'd want to actually get out and explore the country. So that's on my radar, Tim. And that's one of those tips that you gave me and you could put on your channel, which would be really, I would love to see that.
Yeah. So I'll be visiting, I'm probably going to be visiting more places in Europe. So maybe I will be doing 60 by 60. I don't know.
60 by 60. It's your next challenge. Okay, so Tim, who do we have on next week?
Let me go to my phone and I will check.
Who do we have?
I think it's Alison Morton, who is a friend of mine who's an author, and she writes, well, historically she's written this alternative speculative fiction where the Roman Empire was up to the modern day, which sounds weird, but so it's a totally like a 20th century version of the Roman Empire, which is like, so it's a bit like I'm trying to remember that Amazon show, like Man in the High Tower, where they have like Hitler won the Second World War. But this is like the Roman Empire just kept going into the 20th century.
Oh, wow. That's
So
fascinating.
she's written a huge number of books on that. I think she's switched over to writing thrillers now, but I think she might have gone back to writing those. So yeah,
Okay.
she's based in France, and she's a really interesting person to talk to. So
really interesting. I'm excited to hear about this. Did you have her on your other show? Is that?
yeah, she's been on Book Chat Live. She's been on my. I think she was on my Begins of Publishing podcast. So yes, she's on next week, and after that, Andy Campbell, who's somebody you introduced on the show
from the UK, one of our
friends
in the UK.
And yes, so we've got guests booked up. We're organised for a change.
We have guests booked up, and in March I'm crossing the pond, so I might not be in some of those shows. But James said, really good interview. We should have this guest on more often. Yeah. Tim, would you like to come back to the show?
Well, if I'm not hosting it, then yeah.
We should have you again very soon.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're both double guests now, aren't we? We're on the double guest list.
Oh, so, maybe we can win next time we do a award show.
So who's judging the awards? Oh, we are. Anyway, I'm mindful this is live on my LinkedIn personal feed because it doesn't let me go live on the company page, the showcase page for this show. So
Tim needs to answer the llama farm question as we close. Tim, if you were to visit every llama farm in the States, what would you consider in this?
Well, I've no idea how many llama. There probably must be too many llama farms to visit. I don't know though.
We actually visited not the llamas, but alpaca. James and I visited an alpaca farm when I was in the UK. And I guess it wasn't a farm. We were camping and there were alpacas on site. And I will tell you what, they are the most fun animals because all the llama farms. Yeah, James, hashtag all the llama farms. They are the most fun animals. They will follow you around. They have the cutest little haircuts. I want to challenge you to visit at least one alpaca farm or llama farm.
Well, I think I might try and visit, maybe in South America, and go to because that's more their natural habitation. I suppose San Diego used to be part of Mexico. Most of California did actually. So.
Well, if you get to Australia, we have a friend over there that has, I think it was an alpaca farm.
Yeah.
So
I haven't got that. I mean, Australia has been on my visit list for ages. So I do vaguely know somebody in Bali as well. So I'm going to try and visit Bali, but I haven't got that far. The furthest I've been is, well, the furthest place distance-wise I've ever been is Mauritius.
Okay.
My brother was getting married there. The second, and I had to look this up, the second furthest is Hong Kong. So
oh, wow.
You get slightly further than that away. Also, not that I'm a Travo Stato person, but Fairbanks in the US is the furthest north that I've ever been.
So, oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
And I actually went to Iceland on the way in the airport, which doesn't really count. But Iceland was for about 3 days the furthest north I went until I went on the train up to Fairbanks, which is
wow, this is exciting. Gabriella says she loved Hong Kong when she visited.
I love Hong Kong actually. There's a lot. I mean, Hong Kong is interesting because it was for a friend's. The whole trip was for a friend's wedding in Hong Kong. He was getting married in Hong Kong, and we went via Shanghai, Macau, quite a few places. So we actually went to China, and I was a bit overwhelmed by China. Because China is somewhere that people don't speak English, and it's, even though actually a lot of the signage is in English as well, and it's a very cosmopolitan city. But then you go to Hong Kong and everybody speaks. Hong Kong is great for English speakers because it's a really interesting and sort of multicultural and exotic place, but everybody speaks English.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's part of my language restrictions. I need to.
Well, I'm very interested in the food around the world, so I'm waiting for that video as well. I have a few. expectations. Tim, thank you for answering all these questions on the show. We're actually running quite a bit over time, but this was fun to hear about your travels and learn more about why this channel. And everyone can jump on his new channel, see what he's doing, get some travel tips both here and around the world. So thank you, Tim.
And feel free to pester me on the channel if I haven't produced a video by at least once a month, because you know how it is. It's like, if you don't do it, it doesn't get done. And I feel I've got a lot to teach in terms of, and I know it's the whole Dunning-Kruger effect, in that I used to think I knew a lot about travel, and to some extent I do, but then I know I've got an awful lot to learn. But then I know there's an awful lot of other people who are even further back.
You have a lot of tips to teach, and we have things to learn that we haven't even thought of. So I'm excited for this for you, and I'm excited for people to stop by and see it. So the links are in our comments and also on our little linky link here.
QR code. QR code. We should get your phone and your photo app, and then you just click in. It should come up like Tim Lewis. Well, actually, try it. Like,
I've tried it before, Tim. It works.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's good. It works. So we will see you, James, Gabriella. Thank you for helping with this interview. Everyone will be back next week, and we will
with a proper guest.
With a proper guest.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This is what God requires.